The signal arrived on a Tuesday. Dr. Sarah Chen stared at her monitor in the radio astronomy lab at Arecibo, watching as the pattern repeated itself for the seventh time. It wasn't random noise, and it certainly wasn't natural. The signal pulsed with a precision that could only be artificial, following prime numbers in a sequence that made her hands shake as she reached for her phone. Within hours, similar reports flooded in from radio telescopes across the globe. The signal was everywhere, as if someone had suddenly turned on every radio station in the sky at once. But that wasn't what made Sarah's blood run cold. It was the fact that, according to her calculations, these signals had been broadcasting for at least 3 centuries. We simply hadn't been able to hear them until now. The truth emerged in fragments over the following weeks. The signal wasn't meant for humans. It was meant for everyone else. A vast network of psychic communications that spanned the galaxy, invisible to humanity not through any technological limitation, but because of something far more fundamental, the human mind itself. It's like we've been living in a bubble, Dr. Chen explained to the UN Security Council 3 months later. The holographic display behind her showed a visualization of what they now called the resonance network. Our consciousness naturally generates a dampening field. We've been blocking these signals since before we invented the wheel. The chamber erupted in murmurs as she continued. The recent shift in the background radiation of our solar system, what we initially thought was an equipment malfunction, temporarily weakened this effect. That's why we can suddenly hear them. And that's also why they can finally see us. The first official contact came 2 days later. The Galactic Council, as they called themselves, arrived in a ship that seemed to phase into existence just beyond the moon's orbit. Their message was diplomatic, cordial even, but Sarah noticed something in their carefully chosen words, something that reminded her of anthropologists approaching an isolated tribe. The council representatives, towering crystalline beings that communicated through pulses of light, explained that humanity was unique. In a galaxy where every other known sentient species had evolved to harness the psychic dimension, humans had developed in complete isolation, shielded by their own minds. Your species is a scientific marvel. The council's primary speaker, who called itself Luminarch, told the assembled world leaders, "We wish to study your unique traits, to understand how you've achieved such perfect psychic isolation. In return, we offer you protection, technology, and a place among the civilized species of the galaxy." But Sarah Chen noticed something else during that first meeting, something in the way the crystalline beings shifted when humans moved too close, something like fear. Her suspicions were confirmed when she discovered the classified reports. Other human scientists, working in secret, had found that our dampening field didn't just block psychic energy, it could actively disrupt it. Every human mind was essentially a walking blind spot in the Council's vast psychic network. That night, as she stared at the alien ship glinting in the moonlight through her laboratory telescope, Sarah made a decision. She began composing an email to certain key figures in the global scientific community. If humanity's consciousness could create such powerful dampening effects naturally, what might be possible if they learned to control it? The Council had made a critical mistake in their calculations. They thought they were studying humanity. They didn't realize humanity was studying them back. As Sarah hit send on her email, a new message appeared on her screen. It was from an anonymous source, but the contents made her breath catch. Other species had begun reaching out in secret. Species who had lived under the Council's psychic dominance for millennia. Species who saw in humanity's primitive minds the key to their freedom. The signal that had arrived on that Tuesday wasn't just a discovery. It was the beginning of a revolution that would reshape the galaxy. And humanity, the species that had evolved in silence, would lead the way. The Council thought they were offering humanity protection. They didn't realize they were the ones who would soon need protecting. Sarah closed her laptop and looked up at the stars. For the first time in human history, they weren't silent anymore. But soon, very soon, they would learn why silence could be the most powerful force in the universe. The game was about to begin, and humanity had been practicing for their entire existence without even knowing it. The Galactic Council's integration program moved with suspicious speed. Within months, they had established embassies in every major Earth city, crystalline spires that pulsed with otherworldly light. They called them cultural exchange centers, but Dr. Sarah Chen knew better. Each tower was a psychic amplifier, trying desperately to pierce humanity's natural dampening field. She watched from her lab as another transport ship descended over New York, its hull shimming with the same iridescent material as the towers. The Council claimed they were bringing gifts of technology and knowledge. In reality, they were bringing surveillance equipment, each piece designed to study humanity's consciousness barrier. "They're getting nervous," Admiral James Rodriguez said, stepping into her lab. The newly appointed head of Earth's Defense Council wasn't wearing his uniform today. "This meeting wasn't official. Our dampening effect is spreading." Sarah nodded, pulling up the latest data on her holographic display. The graphs told a story that the Council was desperately trying to hide. Every human colony ship that left Earth's orbit created another dead zone in their psychic network. Humanity wasn't just resistant to psychic energy. They were actively disrupting it. The Council's latest proposal, Rodriguez continued, they want to protect our colonies by surrounding them with their own ships. They claim it's for our safety. "It's containment," Sarah replied, zooming in on a sector of space where human ships had recently passed. The psychic dead zone lingered for weeks afterward. "They're trying to limit our expansion while they figure out how to neutralize our ability." But the Council's attempts at containment had already failed. Sarah's secret network of contacts among other species had grown. The Varen, silicon-based beings who had served as the Council's administrators for millennia, were particularly interested in humanity's dampening effect. They had experienced the Council's protection firsthand, their entire civilization regulated through psychic control. The message that arrived that evening confirmed Sarah's suspicions. The Varen had been conducting their own studies, and the results were staggering. Human consciousness didn't just create dead zones in psychic space, it could permanently alter it. Every region where humans had traveled showed microscopic changes in the fabric of space-time itself, changes that weakened the Council's psychic influence even after the humans had left. "We're not just blocking their network," Sarah explained to the emergency session of Earth's Defense Council. "We're changing the fundamental rules of how psychic energy works in our vicinity, and the effect is cumulative." The implications were enormous. The Council's power was based on their mastery of psychic energy, their ability to maintain a galaxy-wide network of control. But humanity's mere presence was like static in their signal, growing stronger with each passing day. The Council's next move proved they understood the threat. Their proposal came wrapped in diplomatic niceties. They wanted to establish training centers on Earth to help humans develop their psychic potential. The facilities would be staffed by Council mentors, of course, and would require regular psychological examinations of human subjects. Earth's governments were divided on how to respond, but Sarah's network had already uncovered the truth. The Varen smuggled out copies of the Council's internal communications. The training centers were actually research facilities designed to find a way to suppress humanity's dampening effect. The Council wasn't trying to help humans develop. They were trying to change what made humans human. The decision was made in secret, in a meeting that officially never happened. Earth would appear to accept the Council's proposal, but with a modification. They would build their own facilities, using Council guidance. What the Council didn't know was that these facilities would house humanity's own research projects. While the Council searched for a way to suppress humanity's dampening field, Earth's scientists would work to enhance it. The game of deception cut both ways. The Council thought they were containing a potential threat. They didn't realize they were helping humans learn exactly how their psychic technology worked, knowledge that would prove crucial in the coming conflict. As Sarah reviewed the construction plans for the new research facilities, she received another encrypted message from her Varen contacts. Other species were watching Earth's quiet resistance with growing interest. The Council's perfect psychic network had developed its first static, and that static was spreading. The silence that had protected humanity for so long was becoming their greatest weapon. And soon, very soon, the Council would learn just how powerful silence could be when wielded with purpose. The Mindweaver faction struck without warning. Their fleet materialized in Earth's orbit like a shower of metallic stars, their ships' crystalline hulls reflecting sunlight in dazzling arrays. The Council had fractured, and its most militant members had decided to solve the human problem permanently. Dr. Sarah Chen watched from the command center beneath Geneva as the first wave of psychic attacks rolled across the planet. In any other civilization, it would have been devastating. A telepathic assault designed to paralyze every conscious mind in its path. But humanity had been preparing for this moment. Dampening field at 200% of baseline, she announced, monitoring the global network they'd built in secret. Every research facility that the Council thought was trying to suppress humanity's natural abilities was actually amplifying them. The attack isn't penetrating. Admiral Rodriguez stood at the main tactical display, watching as the Mindweaver ships attempted to establish their psychic beachhead. Their frustration was evident in the increasingly erratic movements of their fleet. Nothing in their millennia of military doctrine had prepared them for an enemy they couldn't touch with their most powerful weapons. They're switching to conventional weapons, the tactical officer reported, but even this demonstrated their fundamental misunderstanding of what they were facing. The first kinetic strikes splashed harmlessly against Earth's new defensive screen, a barrier not of energy or matter, but of concentrated human consciousness. The research facilities had discovered how to project humanity's natural dampening field, creating zones where the very laws of physics became fluid and uncertain. Multiple ships attempting to land, Rodriguez announced. They're trying to establish ground-based amplifiers. Sarah allowed herself a small smile. Let them. The Mindweaver ground forces discovered their error too late. The closer they got to human population centers, the stronger the dampening effect became. Their psychic technology didn't just fail, it began to break down at the quantum level. Crystalline computers shattered, neural interfaces went dark, and their supposedly invincible warriors found themselves cut off from the psychic network that had guided their entire civilization. But the true turning point came from an unexpected source. The Varen, who had been secretly coordinating with human intelligence, chose this moment to act. Throughout the galaxy, Varen administrators simultaneously activated dormant protocols in the Council's network, creating artificial dead zones that mimicked humanity's dampening effect. The Mindweaver fleet found itself not only blind around Earth, but increasingly isolated from their base of power. The psychic network that had maintained their dominance for millennia was developing holes, static, and shadow zones that their technology couldn't penetrate. We're receiving transmissions, Sarah's assistant reported. Other species, they're asking for asylum. They're using the chaos to escape Council control. The Mindweavers had unwittingly triggered exactly what they had feared most, a cascade of independence movements across the galaxy. Species that had lived under psychic domination saw in humanity's resistance a path to freedom. Sarah's network had expanded beyond anything the Council could have imagined. The Varen weren't the only ones who had been waiting for this moment. The quantum dancers of the Carina Nebula, the silicon mines of the Outer Rim, the crystalline cores of the core worlds, all had seen in humanity's unique trait the key to breaking the Council's monopoly on galactic power. The battle for Earth lasted less than 6 hours. The Mindweaver fleet, cut off from their psychic network and facing weapons they couldn't comprehend, retreated in disarray. But the real victory wasn't military, it was evolutionary. We've confirmed it, Sarah told the assembled world leaders later that day. Our dampening field doesn't just block their abilities, it's teaching other species how to resist psychic influence. We're not just defending ourselves, we're changing the fundamental balance of power in the galaxy. The implications were staggering. Humanity's consciousness wasn't just a shield, it was a template that other species could adapt and emulate. The very trait that had kept humans isolated for so long was now becoming the foundation of a new galactic order. As the Mundweaver fleet limped back to their territory, they left behind a changed galaxy. The Council's perfect psychic network was now riddled with dead zones, quiet spaces where species could think, plan, and evolve free from psychic control. Sarah received one final message from her Varen contacts that night. The Council was splintering further, divided between those who wanted to destroy humanity and those who had begun to understand a fundamental truth. The age of psychic dominance was ending. The age of silence, willing, chosen silence, was about to begin. Humanity hadn't just defended itself, it had shown the galaxy a new way to exist. And in the quiet spaces between the stars, revolution was spreading. In the months following the Mindweaver attack, humanity made a discovery that changed everything. It wasn't just their consciousness that created dead zones in psychic space. They were actually generating holes in the fabric of reality itself. Dr. Sarah Chen stood in the observation deck of humanity's first purpose-built research station in deep space, watching as test ships deliberately passed through these consciousness rifts. The vessels seemed to flicker, becoming temporarily invisible to both normal sensors and psychic detection. "We're not just blocking their network," she explained to Admiral Rodriguez, who had traveled from Earth for this demonstration. "We're creating spaces where their laws of physics don't fully apply. Our minds naturally exist slightly out of phase with standard spacetime." The implications were staggering. These consciousness rifts weren't just defensive measures. They were the key to a completely new form of space travel. Ships passing through these zones could traverse vast distances by sliding between the layers of reality that the Council's psychic network had previously held rigid. But the most profound discovery came from their allies. The Varen scientists, working alongside human researchers, found that prolonged exposure to human consciousness was causing subtle changes in their own species' mental architecture. "It's like a cascade effect," the lead Varen researcher, who had taken the human name Edison, explained through their translator. "Your natural phase shift is teaching our minds how to create similar effects. We're learning to step outside the Council's psychic grid." The news spread quickly through Sarah's now extensive network of contacts. Species that had lived under psychic dominance for millennia were beginning to develop their own versions of humanity's dampening field. The effect wasn't as strong as humanity's natural ability, but it was growing stronger with each passing generation. The Council, or what remained of it after the Mindweaver faction's failed attack, could only watch as their perfect psychic network developed more and more blind spots. These weren't just dead zones anymore. They were evolving spaces where new forms of consciousness could flourish. "We're receiving another wave of asylum requests," Rodriguez reported during their weekly briefing. "Not just from individual ships now. Entire star systems are trying to align themselves with Earth's sphere of influence." Sarah reviewed the data on her quantum tablet. The star map of the galaxy was changing. Traditional borders based on psychic control were dissolving, replaced by patches of what they now called silent space, regions where consciousness could exist free from the Council's network. But it wasn't just about escape anymore. The species seeking humanity's protection were bringing their own discoveries. The silicon minds had developed ways to encode information in the quantum fluctuations of consciousness rifts. The crystalline cores had found that their natural resonance could amplify the dampening effect, creating vast zones of silence. "We're not just creating safe havens," Sarah realized. "We're building an entirely new kind of civilization." The research station became a hub of interspecies cooperation. Races that had been separated by the Council's psychic barriers for millennia were finally meeting as equals in the quiet spaces humanity had created. And in these spaces, freed from psychic interference, they were beginning to remember things. Ancient knowledge that the Council had suppressed. The quantum dancers remembered ways of moving through space without ships. The silicon minds recalled methods of computation that didn't rely on traditional physics. The crystalline cores rediscovered harmonies that could reshape matter itself. But the most significant revelation came from deep within human space. A team of researchers studying consciousness rifts detected something extraordinary: echoes of other universes, other realities that had always existed parallel to their own. The Council's psychic network hadn't just controlled communication, it had been artificially limiting how species could perceive and interact with the multiverse itself. They weren't just controlling information, Sarah explained to an emergency session of Earth's scientists. They were controlling reality itself, keeping everyone locked into a single, manageable version of space-time. As she spoke, another consciousness rift opened near the station. Through it came a ship unlike any they'd seen before, a vessel piloted by beings from one of these parallel realities, drawn to the holes humanity was creating in the Council's carefully maintained wall between dimensions. The galaxy wasn't just experiencing a political revolution. It was undergoing a fundamental shift in how consciousness itself interacted with reality. And humanity, the species that had evolved in isolation, was inadvertently teaching the galaxy how to dream again. In the quiet spaces between the stars, a new age was beginning. The age of controlled, uniform reality was ending. The age of infinite possibility was about to dawn. 5 years after the Mindweaver attack, the galaxy had become unrecognizable. The rigid psychic network that had maintained order for millennia had transformed into a tapestry of silent spaces, consciousness rifts, and new forms of existence that the Council had never imagined possible. Dr. Sarah Chen stood on the observation deck of Unity Station, humanity's first truly interspecies installation, watching as ships from a dozen different realities docked in perfect harmony. The station existed simultaneously in multiple phases of space-time, a feat made possible by the combined knowledge of humanity's consciousness manipulation and the recovered ancient sciences of their alien allies. The last Council stronghold surrendered this morning, Admiral Rodriguez announced, joining her at the window. He had aged considerably since their first meeting, but his eyes held the same determination. They're requesting to join the Free Species Alliance. Sarah nodded, unsurprised. The Council's power had been built on controlling and limiting consciousness. Once species began to break free of those limitations, their entire system of control had begun to unravel. "How are the integration protocols proceeding?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. The Verne had been instrumental in designing systems to help formerly Council-controlled species adapt to life without psychic regulation. "Better than expected," Rodriguez replied. "Edison's team has perfected the consciousness harmonization technique. Even former Council races are learning to generate their own quiet spaces." The transformation hadn't been without its challenges. Some species, so long dependent on the psychic network, had initially struggled with independence, but humanity's greatest contribution hadn't been their dampening field. It had been their experience with individual consciousness, their millennia of evolution as beings who thought and existed independently. "The quantum dancers have made another breakthrough," Sarah said, pulling up a holographic display. "They found a way to use consciousness rifts for instantaneous communication across any distance. It's not psychic control, it's more like sharing dreams." This was perhaps the most profound change of all. The galaxy was learning that there were ways to connect that didn't require control. The silence that humanity had brought wasn't emptiness, it was space for something new to grow. The Free Species Alliance had emerged as a fundamentally different kind of civilization. Instead of the rigid hierarchy of the Council, it was a fluid network of independent species, each contributing their unique perspectives and abilities. The silicon mines provided processing power that could model infinite possibilities. The crystalline cores helped maintain the harmony of different consciousness frequencies. The quantum dancers explored the deepening connections between thought and reality. And humanity, they had become the guardians of silence, the maintainers of spaces where consciousness could evolve freely. Their ships patrolled the borders between realities, their stations provided neutral ground for species to meet and collaborate, and their scientists continued to push the boundaries of what was possible when minds were truly free. "We're receiving a transmission from the edge," Rodriguez said. interrupting Sarah's thoughts. The edge was what they called the frontier of explored space, where the Council's influence had never reached. The message was brief but profound. They had detected signals from other galaxies, not psychic communications, but consciousness rifts similar to humanity's. Somewhere out there, other species had evolved in isolation, developing their own ways of thinking outside the standard model of reality. "Shall we make contact?" Rodriguez asked, but Sarah was already composing a response. "We'll send an invitation," she said, "not to control, not to dominate, but to share what we've learned about the true nature of consciousness and reality." As she spoke, a new ship emerged from a consciousness rift near the station. It was unlike anything they had seen before, a vessel that seemed to exist in multiple states simultaneously, crewed by beings that defied traditional classification. The galaxy hadn't just changed, it had evolved. The age of psychic control had given way to an age of infinite diversity, where consciousness itself was free to explore its full potential. And humanity, the species that had evolved in silence, had become not the rulers of this new age, but its guides and guardians. "We didn't conquer the galaxy," Sarah said, watching as the new ship was welcomed into Unity Station's embrace. "We freed it, not through force, not through control, but through the simple act of being ourselves." In the quiet spaces between the stars, consciousness continued to evolve. The silence that had once isolated humanity had become the foundation of a civilization based not on control, but on possibility. And somewhere out there, in the vast expanse between galaxies, other minds were awakening to their own potential, ready to join the endless dance of free consciousness across the multiverse. The conquest was complete, but it wasn't a conquest of power. It was a conquest of liberation, achieved not through weapons or psychic might, but through humanity's greatest gift to the galaxy, the power of silence and the infinite possibilities that bloom in quiet spaces